He's a columnist for Badger Extra, Madison.com, Wisconsin State Journal. He covers Wisconsin, the Badgers, the Packers, and more. Jim Polzin joins us on 365 Sports with Paul and Craig. I'm David. And Jim, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. What has been the reaction on the transfer and commitment from Tanner Mordecai?
Nothing but positivity up here for sure. I mean, it's been a wild month. They've gotten commitments from multiple quarterbacks. Nick Evers was was kind of the first big splash in the transfer portal for Luke Fickell. That was like a month ago, but I think people understood that he maybe wasn't a ready-made product, and they were probably going to go into the transfer portal and try to get someone more experienced. And then, Tanner Mordecai kind of came along. It's one of those weird things where sometimes guys go in the portal and they sit there for a week or two, and you kind of get your hopes up if you're a fan. This happened very fast. I think Wisconsin fans were kind of stunned by it, but very, very encouraged and excited by what he can do.
He fits well into Phil Longo's scheme. I know that it's been reported about his connection with Phil Longo going back to when he recruited him when Longo was at Ole Miss. But how much have the fans gotten excited about what is a gigantic sea change in the philosophy that was in Madison ever? I mean, they've not ever really run an offense like this, have they?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, you think about this kind of an era here, is the Barry Alvarez era, and that goes back to 1990. So we're talking 30 plus years. And I mean, it's not been the same offense at their entire time, but it's certainly been a very run heavy offense. And the words air raid have not been in the vocabulary up here. So I think fans are ready for it. I mean, I think, if you poll the fans here, they're ready for change, and they're ready for this program got a little stale and complacent. And I think, Luke Fickell's come in a really short time and brought kind of an energy, a good vibe, and hiring Phil Longo is, that's an eye opener for people up here. But I think we're all kind of just anxious to see how it's going to look, I've kind of come around to it. I think my first reaction was, that can't possibly work in the Big Ten. And now, the more you watch it a little bit on YouTube and whatever, and hear about it, I think it can work. And I think the thing that Wisconsin fans probably were scared of at first is that, they're just going to throw the ball 70 times a game. And I don't think that's Phil Longo's personality at all. He wants to run the ball. They're going to throw the ball a little bit more than they have in the past, but he definitely wants to have a rushing attack that works well and works well in November and December out here.
Jim, very unique experience, watching the Guaranteed Rate Bowl just a couple weeks ago and seeing Luke Fickell already out there as head coach of Wisconsin. They get the win, obviously. That had to feel good. But what was that experience sort of like on your standpoint, seeing that and fans seeing him already kind of getting underway? And how valuable do you think that was for this program?
Yeah, it was weird is the right way to describe it, because I'm not really sure he was officially the head coach in that game. I mean, he even admitted it. He was kind of the figurehead. And there were times on the sideline where, you could kind of tell he wanted to call a timeout, and yet he was kind of looking to Jim Leonard, and it was, to make sure everybody was on the same page. So it wasn't like a typical head coaching experience where, their call is the only call. It was, the game itself was kind of interesting. I do think it was important for him to do that. It was just such an awkward thing with, 95% of the people around here, myself included, thinking that Jim Leonard was going to get the job. And then, they give it to Fickell, and then it becomes, is Leonard going to stick around as defensive coordinator? And that answer turned out to be no, but, he said he'd stick through the bowl game and serve as a pseudo interim coach. So it was very awkward, but I think it was important for Fickell to kind of be the face of the program going forward. So I'm not sure Jim Leonard wanted that role. I don't think he felt kind of that awkwardness of being the guy when you've got the rug pulled out from under you. So I think that was important. I think it was also important for Fickell to, some coaches when they're hired just kind of ignore that bowl game and just kind of stay away from it. And he didn't. He was very out in front. I think he got to meet a lot of families out there. I think that was important to him. So, again, the guy's been on the job for 35 days. I don't think he's made a bad move yet. And I think that, the way he handled the bowl game, I think was impressive. Another thing he did was after the game, he went up on stage to collect the trophy. And I think he felt a little off about that because, it wasn't his team that got there. And he called Jim Leonard up there and had him say a few words. So I think that was another move where you're kind of like, all right, this guy's kind of doing the right thing.
There were thoughts that Leonard could end up even on Dave Aranda's staff at Wisconsin. He hired Matthew Palage of Oregon. So what is next for Leonard?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I honestly thought that Baylor might be a landing spot for him because I know him and Dave got along really, really well. When Jim retired from the NFL, he spent a year kind of shadowing the UW staff, and Dave Aranda was the defensive coordinator at the time. And I know those guys hit it off really well. I know their philosophies are similar. So I thought that might be a place that he landed. But he's going to have a ton of options in NFL. Otherwise, I mean, he turned down the Packers defensive coordinator job 2 years ago, and that might come open again in the next month. So I think that might be an option. I also think there's an option where he sits out for a year and maybe serves as an NFL consultant or something. He's got 3 young boys. He's got a wife. He played the NFL game where, he was kind of bouncing around a little bit, and every January he'd kind of look around and say, where am I going to be next season? I don't think he wants to do that. I think he wants stability for his family. I think that's really important to him. So I don't think he's going to just jump into anything. And, we'll see. He's going to have options. They're paying him for next season. He had a 2-year contract, and Wisconsin's paying him for next season. So he doesn't really have to go anywhere if he doesn't want to. And I really would not be shocked to see him just kind of sit this one out, unless the perfect spot came along for him and his family.
I would probably throw USC in that mix right now too, if they make a decision with Alex Grinch. But Jim, how much has Luke Fickell changed the way that they recruit in Madison? In that, look, you've got. I mean, these are 2 guys out of the portal, but Evers and Mordecai, both from Texas, both via OU too, as well. But how has he changed that? And do you see them being maybe of a more national than regional recruiter now that Fickell is in the fold?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a really good question. And yet he has said multiple times, he said it when he got hired, he said it on signing day, that he kind of wants to operate with this 350-mile radius from Madison. And I think what he means there is that that's where most of the guys are going to come from. And Barry Alvarez is very similar too. I think Barry's famous line was, our heart and soul is going to come from the state of Wisconsin, but our hands and feet are going to have to come from elsewhere because this state produces a lot of linemen, linebackers. It doesn't produce a lot of high-end, skill level guys, skill position guys. And I think Fickell understands that, but I think he wants to hit Chicago. I think he wants to hit Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Detroit, all those areas. But I do like the fact that they've already, gotten into Texas a little bit with these quarterbacks. I think they're going to have to hit Ohio. Ohio's been a state that's been really good to this program under Alvarez, and Fickell's got connections there. So I hope that's an area they hit too. So I think, long story short, I think it's going to end up being recruiting classes are going to end up being where they kind of hit a little bit from everywhere. But I think he's probably right that, the majority of that class is going to come from that 350-mile radius.
Hey, Jim, thank you very much for your time. You'll love Tanner Mordecai, and obviously he's got to go produce or whatever, and just a great young man. We covered him in high school, as I sent the interview to you earlier for you to use it however you want. And thanks for your time. Good luck. Enjoy covering Wisconsin. You mentioned the Packers and Leonard. How about the run that Aaron Rodgers and the Packers are on now, controlling their own destiny?
It's crazy. I ruled them out. It's funny. I wrote about this last week after they beat the Vikings, but I have this mailbag every week, and someone asked me when they're 4-8, is it time to bench Rodgers and play Jordan Love? And at the time, Rodgers had shoulder injury, he had a thumb injury, and I'm like, yes, let's sit him down, and the season's essentially over. Let's see what you have in Jordan Love and go from there. And then, I did kind of a mea culpa after the Vikings game because that sounds like a stupid answer now. They're back in it. And that's the weird thing about the NFL is you get hot at the right time and suddenly you become a scary team if you get in the playoffs. So I don't know how far they're going to go. I think they still have limitations, but the fact that we're talking right now that they control their own playoff fate is, frankly, if you had told me that a month ago, I would have told you were crazy.
Yep. And there's a lot of teams, including one here in Texas, that even
I would love that matchup, guys.
Oh my God! Well, Paul's a lifelong Cowboys fan. I'm not. Neither is Craig. But yeah,
Jim, I wake up.
I'm not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like the matchup for the. I'm sorry. I'm not saying I would like it. That'd be a great matchup for the Packers. I just, I cheer for the story, and Green Bay versus Mike McCarthy to go to the Super Bowl or go deep in the playoffs would be a story that I would love to cover. You know,
Jim, I was there at AT&T Stadium the day that Aaron Rodgers hit the unlikeliest pass I've ever seen, and it wakes me up in cold sweats in the middle of the night. So
I thought you were there covering it as a journalist.
Well, I mean, look, there's two parts of me, and that was one of the few times I was like on the elevator going, "Damn it!"
I think that's the difference in the opinions. Is Jim's
Yeah.
looking at it from a journalism point of view, Paul's looking at it from a Cowboys fan point of
I mean,
view.
also I had to go into that locker room afterwards, and then you can't ask them, Jim. You know this sometimes in games when you go down to a locker room to like cover it, and they've lost a tough game. The answer to every question is, "Well, what do you want?" Like it's crazy.
Right.
Sports. Like, what are you supposed to ask the Cowboys that you're going to get a good answer with? And they're like, "Yeah, Aaron Rodgers is alive in the world and plays football. I wish he was like a sailboat captain or something, and not this, but he's here and ruining my life. What do you want from me?" I like that. That's kind of the answer you get, and it's hard to even get anything usable because you're like, well, Aaron Rodgers is here, and that's why.
Yep.
yeah, he's done it. You know, I hope you feel good about this, but he's done that to a lot of teams. You know, it's really not just the Cowboys. So the crazy thing about this run late in the season is he's not played that well. I mean, they've really done this with defense and a running game, and he hasn't had a passer rating. He hasn't had a 300-yard game yet this year, guys. Not one single 300-yard game. How crazy is that?
What?
A guy coming off 2 MVPs. Yeah, I mean, he's been very, you know, I use the word mediocre loosely because he's an NFL quarterback who's, you know, proven it. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. But by his standards, he has been very mediocre this year. And the amazing part is here they are potentially going to go to the playoffs.
And it's the Lions and Packers for a chance to get to the playoffs. Jim, thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure,
Jim Polzin, the Wisconsin State Journal, Badger Extra, and also Madison.com. Appreciate his feedback.
Very impressed by